When firefighter Jake Martinez pulled 8-year-old Emma from the burning apartment building, he thought he was just doing his job. The little girl's terrified eyes haunted him through the night, but by morning she was just another life saved, another family reunited. What Jake didn't know was that Emma wasn't just any child. She was the daughter of Vincent Torino, the city's most dangerous crime boss. And in Vincent's world, debts must always be repaid. When the black SUV rolls up to Jake's modest house the next morning, everything Jake thought he knew about right and wrong is about to change forever. Before we dive in, make sure to hit subscribe and leave a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The alarm screamed at 3:47 a.m. Jake Martinez rolled from bed before his mind fully registered the sound, muscle memory from 12 years with the Chicago Fire Department pulling him to his feet. The radio crackled from the nightstand. Apartment fire, possible entrapment, all units respond. He was dressed and moving before the details sank in. Riverside Complex, Building 4. That was the low-income housing project, 6 blocks from his own neighborhood. Dad? 7-year-old Sophia stood in her doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Her dark hair stuck up in wild cowlicks, and she clutched the stuffed elephant he'd won her at the county fair last summer. Just work, mija. Go back to bed. Is someone hurt? Jake paused, 1 foot already out the door. Sophia had been asking harder questions lately, about why mommy wasn't coming back, about why some daddies left and some stayed, about why bad things happened to good people. I don't know yet, but that's why I have to go. She nodded, solemn as always. Too serious for 7. Be careful, always am. But as he drove toward the orange glow painting the night sky, Jake wondered if that was true anymore. The building was already half consumed when Engine 19 arrived. Flames licked from third-floor windows, while residents scattered across the parking lot in pajamas and bare feet. Jake pulled on his gear and scanned the crowd, counting faces, looking for the gaps. Captain Reynolds appeared at his shoulder. 4th floor's clear except for 4B. Elderly man got himself out but says there's still a kid up there. Jake's stomach dropped. How old? 8, maybe 9. Little girl. The building groaned as support beams shifted. They had minutes, maybe less. I'll take the west stairwell, Jake said, but Reynolds caught his arm. Structure's compromised. We're setting up the ladder. No time. Jake was already moving, ignoring Reynolds' shouts. The west stairwell was filling with smoke, but the walls were still solid. He took the steps 3 at a time, breathing apparatus hissing. 4th floor. The hallway was an oven, wallpaper curling and bubbling. 4B was at the end door closed, which meant the fire hadn't broken through yet. Small mercy. Jake tried the handle. Locked. Fire department? He pounded on the door. Anyone in there? A sound. Faint but definitely human. A child's voice. The hallway filled with another groan from the building's bones. No time for finesse. Jake stepped back and drove his shoulder into the door. Once, twice. The frame splintered. The apartment was dark except for the orange glow seeping under the bedroom door. Smoke hung low but hadn't filled the space yet. Jake swept his flashlight beam across the main room. Fire department, call out. Here. The voice came from behind the couch. I'm here. Jake rounded the furniture and found a little girl with dark curls matted to her head, pressed into the corner like she was trying to disappear into the wall itself. She wore pink pajamas and clutched a backpack against her chest. Their eyes met in the flashlight beam, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Not of faces, but of something deeper. 2 people who knew what it meant to be afraid. Hey there. Jake kept his voice calm, removed his helmet so she could see his face. I'm Jake. I'm here to get you out. My grandpa said to wait here if something bad happened. Your grandpa's smart. But now I need you to come with me, okay? She shook her head. He said never go with strangers. Jake glanced at the bedroom door. The glow underneath was getting brighter. You're right to listen to your grandpa. But see this uniform? He tapped his chest. This means I'm a firefighter. It's my job to keep you safe. The building shuddered. Plaster dust rained from the ceiling. What's your name? Jake extended his hand. Emma. Emma's a beautiful name. Now, Emma, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? She studied his face for a long moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. Jake scooped her up, backpack and all. She was lighter than Sophia, all sharp elbows and bird bones. Hold on tight, and keep your face buried in my shoulder, okay? Don't look up no matter what. The trip down felt like swimming through hell. Smoke poured through gaps in the walls now, and the stairs felt soft under Jake's boots. Emma's fingers dug into his neck, but she didn't make a sound. They burst through the exit door into the parking lot just as the fourth-floor windows exploded outward in a shower of glass and flame. Jake carried Emma to the ambulance, where paramedics wrapped her in blankets and checked her vitals. She hadn't spoken since leaving the apartment, but her eyes tracked Jake's every movement. "Where's her family?" Jake asked the paramedic. "Old man who called it in is her grandfather. Heart attack. They took him to Mercy General 20 minutes ago." Jake looked back at Emma. She sat perfectly still on the ambulance bumper, backpack still clutched against her chest, watching the building burn. "Anyone else coming for her?" "Social services. Should be here soon." Something twisted in Jake's chest. He thought of Sophia, alone in their house, probably awake now and worrying. He thought of all the children who waited for someone to come get them, and all the times no one ever did. "Can I?" Jake started, then stopped. Protocol said his job was done. Structure saved who could be saved, let the system handle the rest. But Emma was still looking at him. Jake walked over and crouched in front of her. "Your grandpa's going to be okay. The doctors are taking good care of him." She nodded but didn't speak. "Is there anyone else? Anyone you want me to call?" Emma's grip tightened on the backpack. She whispered something so quietly, Jake had to lean closer. "What was that, sweetheart?" "My daddy doesn't live with us." Jake felt the familiar ache. "Sometimes daddies have to live in different places. But that doesn't mean they don't love you." Emma looked directly at him then, and Jake saw something in her eyes that made his breath catch. It wasn't innocence, it was knowledge. The kind that came too early and never left. "I know about daddies," she said. Before Jake could respond, a social worker arrived, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes and a clipboard. She introduced herself to Emma gently, explained that she would stay with a nice family until Grandpa got better. Emma went without protest, but as the social worker led her toward the car, she looked back at Jake one more time. "Thank you," she said. Jake watched the car disappear into the pre-dawn darkness, Emma's small face visible through the rear window until it turned the corner. The next morning came too soon, and not soon enough. Jake sat at his kitchen table, staring at coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Sophia ate cereal across from him, chattering about a field trip to the science museum. He tried to focus on her words, but his mind kept drifting back to the apartment fire, to Emma's eyes, to the weight of her in his arms as they escaped the flames. "Dad? You're not listening." "Sorry, mija. Tell me again about the dinosaurs." Sophia launched back into her explanation of tyrannosaurs versus velociraptors, complete with sound effects. Jake smiled and made the appropriate responses, but part of him was still in that burning building, still carrying a little girl who understood too much about the world. His phone buzzed. Text from Captain Reynolds. "Good save last night. Reckless as hell, but good save." Jake set the phone aside. He'd been called reckless before. It came with the territory when you had a tendency to run toward danger instead of calculating risk. Maria used to say it was what made him a good firefighter and a terrible husband. Maybe she'd been right about both. "Dad, there's a car outside." Jake looked up from his coffee. Sophia was pressed against the kitchen window, nose fogging the glass. "Probably Mrs. Chen getting her newspaper." "No, it's a big black car. And there's two men in suits." Something cold settled in Jake's stomach. He joined Sophia at the window and felt his blood pressure spike. A black SUV sat at the curb, engine running. Through the tinted windshield, Jake could make out two figures in the front seats. As he watched, the passenger door opened and a man stepped out. Tall, well-dressed, with silver hair and the kind of posture that came from expecting obedience. The man looked directly at the house, directly at the window where Jake stood, and smiled, not a friendly smile. "Sophia, go to your room." "But Dad." "Now." Something in his tone made her move without argument. Jake waited until he heard her bedroom door close, then walked to the front door. The man was already standing on his porch. Up close, Jake could see the expensive suit, the manicured nails, the thin scar that ran from the man's left ear to his jawline. But it was the eyes that told the real story. Flat gray eyes that had seen things and done things and felt nothing about either. "Mr. Martinez." The man's voice carried a slight accent, Italian maybe. "My name is Vincent Torino. I believe you met my daughter last night." The world shifted sideways. Emma. Emma was this man's daughter. Jake's mind raced through possibilities, but they all led to the same dark conclusion. He'd heard the name Vincent Torino before, whispered in police stations and newspaper headlines. One of the city's most powerful crime bosses. Untouchable because he was smart enough to stay in the shadows and ruthless enough to ensure loyalty. "I don't think I understand," Jake said, though he understood perfectly. Vincent smiled again. "Emma Torino, 8 years old, dark hair, pink pajamas. You carried her out of a burning building approximately 11 hours ago." Jake's hand moved instinctively to the door handle, ready to slam it shut. But Vincent raised one finger, not threatening, just a gentle suggestion to wait. "Mr. Martinez, I'm not here to cause you trouble. Quite the opposite. What do you want?" "To say thank you." The words hung between them. Jake studied Vincent's face, looking for the trap. In his experience, dangerous men didn't make house calls to express gratitude. "Your thanks isn't necessary. I was just doing my job." "Ah, but that's where you're wrong." Vincent stepped closer, and Jake caught the scent of expensive cologne and something else, something metallic. "You see, Mr. Martinez, my daughter's life is worth more than your job, more than your pension, more than this house, this neighborhood, this entire city block." The threat was delivered so casually it took Jake a moment to process it. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm explaining value." Vincent's expression never changed. "And in my world, when someone preserves something of infinite value, that creates a debt that must be repaid. I don't want anything from you, but you're going to get something anyway." Vincent reached into his jacket, and Jake tensed. But instead of a weapon, the man produced a thick envelope. $50,000, cash. Jake stared at the envelope. "I can't take that." "Yes, you can. In fact, you will." "And if I refuse?" Vincent's smile disappeared. "Mr. Martinez, you have a beautiful daughter. 7 years old, if my information is correct. Attends Riverside Elementary. Loves dinosaurs and her stuffed elephant." The blood drained from Jake's face. "Stay away from my daughter. I have no intention of going near your daughter. As long as you take the money." The logic was insane, but Jake could see the calculation behind Vincent's eyes. This wasn't about gratitude, it was about control, about making Jake complicit in whatever world Vincent inhabited. "What happens after I take the money?" "Nothing. You go back to your life. You raise your daughter. You fight fires and save lives. The only difference is that your mortgage is paid off and your daughter's college fund is secure." Jake looked at the envelope again. $50,000. More money than he'd see in 2 years of salary. Enough to fix everything that was broken in their lives. Enough to compromise everything he believed in. "And if I need something someday," Vincent continued, "if I call and ask for a small favor, well, then we'll discuss it, like friends." There it was. The hook buried in the bait. Jake thought about Sophia's college fund, which currently held exactly $1,247, about the mortgage payments that kept him awake at 3 a.m., about the fact that he was one injury away from losing everything. He thought about Emma's eyes in that burning building, about the way she'd trusted him completely in the space between one heartbeat and the next. He thought about the kind of man who threatened a 7-year-old to make a point. "I can't," Jake said. Vincent's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air between them, That's unfortunate. I saved your daughter because it was the right thing to do, not because I wanted anything from you. The right thing. Vincent tested the words like they were foreign. Mr. Martinez, do you know what the right thing got you? A little girl with nightmares and a grandfather who may never leave the hospital. The right thing got Emma back into a system that doesn't care about her, where she'll bounce between foster homes until she's 18. Jake felt the words like a physical blow. What are you talking about? Her grandfather. Massive coronary. Even if he survives, he'll need months of rehabilitation. Social services won't place Emma with someone who can't care for her. The envelope seemed to grow heavier in Vincent's hand. But money, Vincent continued. Money can fix broken systems. Money can ensure that Emma gets the best care, the right placement, a future worth having. Money is the most right thing there is, Mr. Martinez. Jake stared at the man on his porch, hating him for making sense, hating himself for listening. What kind of favors? Small ones. Information mostly. You hear things in your line of work, see things, meet people. You want me to be an informant. I want you to be a friend. The distinction felt meaningless, but Jake could see his options narrowing. He thought about Sophia, about keeping her safe in a world where men like Vincent Torino made house calls. He thought about Emma, lost in a system that would break her as surely as any fire. He thought about the mortgage payment due next week. I need time to think. Vincent glanced at his watch. You have until tonight. I'll be in touch. He turned to go, then paused. Oh, and Mr. Martinez? Your daughter's school has excellent security. But children are so vulnerable. They trust so easily. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Vincent walked back to the SUV without looking back. The vehicle pulled away from the curb smoothly, disappearing around the corner as if it had never been there at all. Jake stood on his porch for a long time, watching the empty street. From inside the house, he could hear Sophia singing to herself some song from a Disney movie about courage and following your heart. Jake closed his eyes and wondered what courage looked like when following your heart meant destroying everything you'd sworn to protect. Jake spent the day trying to pretend everything was normal. He made Sophia pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. He helped her practice reading from her library book about paleontologists. He folded laundry and paid bills and fixed the dripping faucet in the bathroom, all the mundane rituals that kept their life together. But Vincent Torino's words echoed in every quiet moment. Children are so vulnerable. They trust so easily. When Sophia asked why he kept looking out the window, Jake told her he was watching for the mailman. When she asked why he seemed worried, he blamed it on work. She accepted his explanations because 7-year-old children trusted their parents to keep the monsters at bay, even when the monsters wore expensive suits and knew their names. At 3 p.m., Jake called Mercy General Hospital. I'm looking for information about a patient, he told the nurse. Elderly man, brought in last night after a heart attack. Last name might be Torino. Are you family? I'm the firefighter who responded to the scene. A pause. 1 moment, please. Jake waited, watching Sophia color at the kitchen table. She was working on a picture of a house with 2 stick figures, standing in front, one tall, one small, dad and daughter. Safe, and together. Sir? Mr. Torino is listed in critical condition. He's stable, but? He's not expected to make a full recovery. The damage was extensive. Jake thanked the nurse and hung up. Vincent had been telling the truth, at least about that. Emma's grandfather was dying, and she was alone in the system. At 4 p.m., Jake called his insurance company to ask about his coverage if he were injured on the job. The answer wasn't encouraging. Basic disability wouldn't cover their mortgage, let alone Sophia's future needs. At 5 p.m., he checked his bank account balance. The number stared back at him like an accusation. 347.82 in checking, 247 in Sophia's college fund, and a mortgage payment of 834 due in 6 days. At 6 p.m., Sophia asked if they could order pizza for dinner. Not tonight, Mija. We've got plenty of food here, but it's Friday. We always get pizza on Friday." Jake looked at his daughter, really looked at her. When had she gotten so thin? When had her jeans started looking too short? When had he started saying no to $5 pizzas? "You're right," he said. "Pizza it is." Sophia cheered and ran to get the phone, and Jake pretended not to calculate how many meals that $20 could have bought at the grocery store. They ate pepperoni pizza on the living room floor while watching a nature documentary about lions. Sophia provided running commentary about the hunting strategies of big cats, and Jake marveled at how a 7-year-old could make everything seem simple. Predators hunted, prey survived or didn't. The strong protected the weak when they could, abandoned them when they couldn't. Nature was honest about its cruelties. At 8 p.m., Jake tucked Sophia into bed and read her a story about a brave princess who saved her kingdom from a dragon. Sophia fell asleep clutching her stuffed elephant, and Jake sat in the hallway outside her room, listening to her breathe. At 9 p.m., his phone rang. "Mr. Martinez." Vincent's voice was unmistakable. "Have you made your decision?" Jake looked toward Sophia's room. "I need to know something first." "Ask." "Emma, where is she now?" A pause. "Foster placement. Temporary, until more suitable arrangements can be made." "And if I take your money? What happens to her then?" "She gets the best care available. Private placement with a carefully vetted family. Educational opportunities. A future." "And if I don't?" "Then she navigates the system like any other orphan child. Some make it out, most don't." Jake closed his eyes. "This isn't just about gratitude, is it? You're using her as leverage." "I'm using reality as leverage, Mr. Martinez. The reality is that my daughter needs help, and I can provide it. The reality is that your daughter needs security, and I can provide that too. The reality is that we can help each other. What kind of information would you want?" "Nothing dramatic. Police response times to certain neighborhoods. Which buildings get priority during inspections? When certain investigations might be taking place. You want me to help you stay ahead of the law. I want you to help me protect my business interests, which, in turn, protects my ability to take care of the people I care about." The logic was seductive in its simplicity. Information for security, compromise for protection. "And Sophia? Your daughter will be safe. You have my word. The word of a criminal." Vincent's laugh was soft, almost gentle. "Mr. Martinez, I prefer to think of myself as a businessman who operates outside conventional parameters. But yes, if it makes you feel better, the word of a criminal, which, in this case, is worth more than the promises of any judge or politician or social worker you'll ever meet." Jake stood and walked to the window. The street was quiet, but he found himself scanning for black SUVs, for threats that might be lurking in shadows. This was his life now. This was what Vincent had given him in exchange for $50,000 he hadn't even accepted, yet constant vigilance, permanent fear. "I need one more thing," Jake said. "Name it. I want to see Emma. I want to know she's okay before I decide anything." Silence stretched across the connection. Jake could almost hear Vincent calculating, weighing risks and benefits. "That can be arranged. Tomorrow morning. I'll send a car. I'll drive myself." "No, you won't. This requires discretion, Mr. Martinez. People in my position don't leave things to chance." Jake felt the walls closing in. "Where?" "The Riverside Foster Care Facility. 10 a.m. A social worker named Mrs. Chen will meet you there. You'll have 15 minutes with Emma. Enough to satisfy your conscience." "And then?" "Then you decide if you want to save 2 little girls or lose them both." The line went dead. Jake stood at the window for a long time, watching shadows move across his front yard. Somewhere in the city, Emma was lying in a stranger's bed, probably staring at the ceiling and wondering why her grandfather hadn't come to get her yet. Somewhere else, men in expensive suits were making plans that would reshape Jake's life, whether he cooperated or not. And down the hall, Sophia slept peacefully, trusting that her father would keep her safe from all the monsters in the world. The foster care facility occupied a converted office building on the south side of town. Gray concrete walls, barred windows, the institutional smell of disinfectant and despair. Jake sat in his truck across the street, watching children play in a small fenced courtyard. He'd called in sick to work, something he'd done maybe 5 times in 12 years. Captain Reynolds had sounded concerned, asked if everything was all right. Jake had lied smoothly, stomach bug, should be fine tomorrow. Another small compromise. Another step away from the man he used to be. At exactly 10 a.m., a black sedan pulled up to the facility entrance. Not the SUV from yesterday, but the message was clear. Vincent's reach extended into official buildings, professional spaces, places that were supposed to be safe. Jake crossed the street and found Mrs. Chen waiting in the lobby. She was a small Asian woman with kind eyes and worry lines that spoke of too many children and too few resources. "Mr. Martinez? I'm Susan Chen. Thank you for coming. How do you know my name?" "Emma's been asking for you, the firefighter who carried her out. She won't talk to anyone else about what happened that night." Mrs. Chen led him through a maze of hallways lined with children's artwork. Crayon drawings of families and houses and dogs, all the normal things kids dreamed about. All the things most of these children would never have. How is she adjusting? She's unusual. Mrs. Chen paused outside a door, marked Conference Room B. Most children her age who experience trauma become withdrawn or act out. Emma's different. She watches everything, processes everything, but she doesn't react. It's like she's waiting for something. Waiting for what? I was hoping you could tell me. Mrs. Chen opened the door, and Jake's breath caught. Emma sat at a small table, hands folded in her lap, wearing a too large pink sweater and jeans that pooled around her ankles. Her dark hair was neatly braided, but her eyes held the same ancient knowledge he remembered from the burning building. She looked up when he entered, and for the first time since the fire, she smiled. "You came." Jake pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "Of course I came. How are you doing, sweetheart?" "I'm okay." She glanced toward Mrs. Chen, then back to Jake. "They're nice here, but it's not home." "I know. Sometimes we have to stay in different places while the grown-ups figure things out." Emma nodded seriously. "Mrs. Chen says Grandpa is very sick." "He is, but the doctors are taking good care of him." "Will he die?" The question hit Jake like a physical blow. No 7-year-old should have to ask such things so matter-of-factly. "I don't know, Emma. I hope not." She considered this, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper, folded multiple times. She slid it across the table to Jake. "I drew this for you." Jake unfolded the paper carefully. It showed 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, standing in front of a building with red and orange flames shooting from the windows. But above the flames, in the sky, Emma had drawn stars. Dozens of tiny stars scattered across the dark. "It's beautiful. The stars are so people don't get lost," Emma explained. "Even when everything is burning." Jake felt something break open in his chest. "You're very wise, Emma. My daddy says I'm too smart for my own good. Your daddy is proud of you." Emma's expression shifted, became guarded. "You know my daddy?" Jake chose his words carefully. "I met him yesterday. He wanted to thank me for helping you." "He came to see you?" "Yes." Emma's hands moved to her lap, fingers twisting together. "Was he angry?" "Angry? No, sweetheart. Why would he be angry?" "Because I wasn't supposed to be at Grandpa's. Daddy said it wasn't safe, but I missed Grandpa so much, and he makes the best pancakes, and—" She stopped, looking scared. "Is Daddy mad at me for being there when the fire happened?" Jake reached across the table and covered her small hands with his. "Emma, listen to me. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. The fire wasn't your fault, and your daddy isn't angry with you. Promise?" "I promise." She relaxed slightly. "Daddy worries about me a lot. He says there are bad people who might try to hurt me because of his work." Jake felt another piece of the puzzle click into place. "What kind of work does your daddy do?" Emma shrugged. "Business. He has lots of meetings and talks on the phone a lot. He says someday I'll understand. A knock on the door interrupted them. Mrs. Chen peered in. I'm sorry, but we need to wrap up soon. Jake looked at Emma, memorizing her face. I have to go now, but I want you to know something. You're going to be okay. Your daddy loves you very much, and he's making sure you're taken care of. Will I see you again? The question nearly undid him. I hope so. Emma stood and walked around the table. Without warning, she wrapped her arms around Jake's waist and hugged him tightly. Thank you for saving me, she whispered. Jake hugged her back, breathing in the scent of institutional shampoo and something underneath that was purely evanescent and brave and breakable. Thank you for trusting me, he whispered back. When they separated, Emma was crying, but her expression was determined. Will you tell Daddy I'm being good? That I'm not scared? I'll tell him. Jake left the facility with Emma's drawing clutched in his hand and Vincent's ultimatum echoing in his mind. Two little girls, both vulnerable. Both depending on him to make choices that would reshape their futures. He sat in his truck for 20 minutes, staring at Emma's picture of stars burning bright above the flames. Then he drove home to get ready for work, knowing that when his shift ended, he would have to give Vincent Torino an answer. The only question was, which little girl he was willing to sacrifice to save the other. Jake's shift at Station 19 passed in a blur of routine Khalsa kitchen fire, a fender bender on the interstate, an elderly man who'd fallen and couldn't get up. Normal emergencies that had normal solutions. Problems that could be solved with water and first aid and human decency. He found himself studying his fellow firefighters, wondering if any of them had ever been faced with Vincent's kind of choice. If any of them had ever stood at the crossroads between right and legal, between protecting their family and protecting their integrity. Captain Reynolds pulled him aside after the third call. You feeling all right? Martinez? You seem distracted. Just tired. Sophia had nightmares last night. It wasn't entirely a lie. Sophia had woken up twice, claiming she'd heard strange sounds outside. Jake had checked the windows and doors both times, finding nothing but his own paranoia. Kids that age, they're sensitive to stress, Reynolds said. They pick up on things even when we think we're hiding it well. Jake nodded, but his mind was elsewhere, on Emma's drawing, on Vincent's envelope, on the mortgage payment due in 5 days. At 6 p.m., Jake's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Car will pick you up at 8. Come alone. He deleted the message and tried to focus on the equipment checks that needed to be completed before shift change. But his hand shook as he tested the oxygen masks, and twice he had to restart the inventory count because his mind wandered. By 7:30, he was sitting in his truck in the station parking lot, staring at his phone. He could call the police. Tell them about Vincent's threats, about the money, about everything. But Vincent was right about one thing. The system didn't protect people like Emma or Sophia. The system protected itself, processed paperwork, followed protocols that left children in limbo while bureaucrats covered their asses. Jake thought about his own father, who died when Jake was 12. Heart attack on a construction site, no life insurance, no safety net. He remembered his mother working 3 jobs to keep them afloat, remembered eating generic cereal for dinner because it was cheaper than anything else. He remembered being 17 and angry and making choices that could have destroyed his future if he hadn't gotten lucky. The system hadn't saved his family then. Hard work and small miracles and the kindness of strangers had done that. At 7:58, a black sedan pulled into the parking lot. Jake sat motionless for 30 seconds, watching his reflection in the passenger window. The man looking back at him was tired, scared, and older than his 34 years. But he was also a father who would do anything to protect his daughter, even if it meant destroying himself in the process. Jake got out of his truck and walked toward the sedan. The driver was a young man with expensive clothes and empty eyes. He nodded at Jake but didn't speak as they pulled out of the parking lot. They drove through the city in silence, past Jake's neighborhood, past the foster care facility, past the hospital where Emma's grandfather lay dying. Finally, They stopped in front of an upscale Italian restaurant in the financial district. The kind of place Jake couldn't afford to eat at, even for special occasions. Vincent Torino was waiting at a corner table, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Jake made in a month. He stood as Jake approached, extending his hand like they were old friends meeting for dinner. "Mr. Martinez, thank you for coming." Jake ignored the handshake and sat down. "Let's get this over with." Vincent smiled and signaled the waiter. "Would you like something to drink?" "The wine list here is exceptional. I don't drink when I'm working. But you're not working now. You're making a decision about your future." The waiter appeared with a bottle of red wine. Vincent nodded, and the man poured 2 glasses before retreating. Vincent raised his glass in a toast. "To difficult choices." Jake left his glass untouched. "I saw Emma today. I'm aware. How did she seem?" "Scared, confused. Like an 8-year-old who's lost everything that mattered to her." Vincent's expression softened slightly. "Emma has always been sensitive. Too much like her mother in that regard." "Where is her mother?" "Dead. Car accident 3 years ago." Vincent's voice carried no emotion, but his fingers tightened around his wine glass. "Emma was in the car. Spent 2 weeks in the hospital with a concussion and 3 broken ribs. That's when she came to live with her grandfather." Jake felt something shift in his understanding. "You let your daughter live with her grandfather instead of with you." "I made a strategic decision to keep my daughter away from my business. To give her as normal a childhood as possible." Vincent took a sip of wine. "Unfortunately, normal isn't always safe." "And now?" "Now she needs protection that the system can't provide. She needs resources. She needs a future that doesn't depend on the kindness of strangers or the competence of social workers." Vincent reached into his jacket and produced the same envelope from yesterday. He placed it on the table between them. $50,000, Mr. Martinez. Enough to secure your daughter's future and ensure Emma gets the care she deserves. Jake stared at the envelope. "What happens to Emma after I take this?" "She goes to live with a family in California. Good people who understand the importance of discretion. She'll attend private school, have tutors, want for nothing. When she's 18, she'll have access to a trust fund that will set her up for life. And she'll never see you again." Vincent's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something raw underneath. "She'll be safe. That matters more than my feelings." Jake picked up the envelope, testing its weight. $50,000 felt surprisingly light. "Tell me about the favors." "Information. Nothing that would endanger civilians or compromise emergency responses." "I'm not asking you to let buildings burn, Mr. Martinez. Just to let criminals escape. To help a businessman navigate regulatory challenges." Jake opened the envelope. The bills were crisp, new, bundled in stacks of hundreds, more money than he'd ever seen in one place. "And if I refuse?" Vincent's expression hardened. "Then Emma remains in the system. And your daughter? Well, children face so many dangers in today's world. Kidnappers, predators, accidents. It would be a shame if something happened to her because her father made an unwise choice." There it was. The threat delivered with surgical precision. Jake closed the envelope and set it back on the table. "I have one condition." "Name it." "I want to see Emma one more time before she goes to California. I want to say goodbye properly." Vincent considered this. "That can be arranged. And I want your word that Sophia will never be touched. No matter what happens between us in the future, my daughter stays safe." "You have it." Jake picked up the envelope again. $50,000. Emma's future, Sophia's security. The compromise of everything he'd believed about right and wrong. He thought about his father, dead at 43, with nothing to show for a lifetime of honest work. He thought about his mother, broken by poverty and stress and a system that didn't care about people like them. He thought about Emma's drawing, stars shining above the flames. He thought about Sophia, trusting him to keep the monsters away. Jake put the envelope in his jacket pocket. "Welcome to the family, Mr. Martinez," Vincent said, raising his glass again. This time, Jake picked up his wine and drank. It tasted like ashes and blood, and the death of the man he used to be. 3 weeks later, Jake's life looked the same from the outside. He still woke at dawn and made Sophia breakfast. Still drove her to school and kissed her goodbye at the gate. Still responded to emergency calls with the same intensity that had defined his career for 12 years. But everything had changed. The mortgage was paid in full. Sophia's college fund had grown from $1,247 to $25,000 overnight. Jake had told her they'd received a settlement from an old insurance claim-a-lie that came easier than it should have. The first favor Vincent asked for was simple. A building inspection scheduled for a warehouse in the industrial district. Jake just needed to mention it during his next conversation with the fire marshal. Casual information, the kind that got shared over coffee and war stories. Jake told himself it was harmless. The warehouse probably had minor violations anyway. Most old buildings did. The second favor was harder to justify. Police response times to certain addresses, which precincts were short-staffed on which shifts. Information that could help a businessman avoid unwanted encounters with law enforcement, or help a criminal evade justice. Jake provided the information and tried not to think about what Vincent might do with it. He hadn't seen Emma since that day at the foster facility. Vincent had promised she was safe, well cared for, preparing for her new life in California. Jake wanted to believe it, needed to believe it, because the alternative was acknowledging that he'd sold his integrity for nothing. But late at night, when Sophia was asleep and the house was quiet, Jake found himself staring at Emma's drawing, stars burning bright above the flames, a child's vision of hope in the darkness. Some nights, the stars looked like accusation. The third favor came on a Tuesday morning in October. Jake was reviewing equipment manifests when his phone buzzed. Vincent's contact information appeared simply as V in his phone. Another small compromise that had become routine. Need to meet. Usual place. 1 hour. Jake deleted the message and told Captain Reynolds he had a dentist appointment. Another lie in an increasingly complex web of deception. Vincent was waiting at the Italian restaurant, occupying the same corner table they'd used for their previous meetings. But this time, he wasn't alone. A younger man sat across from him, mid-20s, dark hair, expensive clothes that couldn't quite hide the predatory alertness in his eyes. Vincent's son, Jake realized. He had the same bone structure, the same calculating gaze. "Mr. Martinez," Vincent stood and gestured to the empty chair. "I'd like you to meet my nephew, Marco." Marco extended his hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Uncle Vincent's told me a lot about you." Jake shook the offered hand briefly, noting the calluses that suggested Marco wasn't just a businessman in expensive suits. "What can I do for you?" Jake asked, settling into his chair. Vincent signaled the waiter for wine, then leaned forward slightly. "We have a situation that requires your particular expertise." "Fire department expertise?" "Timing expertise." Jake felt his stomach tighten. "I don't understand." Marco spoke for the first time. "There's going to be a fire tomorrow night. Warehouse in the industrial district. We need to ensure response time is delayed." The words hit Jake like cold water. "You want me to help you commit arson?" "We want you to help us manage an unavoidable accident," Vincent corrected smoothly. "The building is scheduled for demolition anyway. We're simply accelerating the timeline. And if someone gets hurt, the building will be empty. We're not animals, Mr. Martinez." Jake's mind raced through the implications. Arson was a felony. Conspiracy to commit arson was a felony. Deliberately delaying emergency response could cost lives, even if the building was supposed to be empty. "I can't do this." Vincent's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air between them. "I'm afraid you misunderstand the nature of our relationship. Our relationship is information for money. That's what we agreed to." "What we agreed to," Marco said, "is that you would be helpful when we needed help. We need help." Jake looked between the two men, seeing his reflection in their eyes. Trapped, complicit, owned. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" Vincent pulled out a tablet and showed Jake a map of the industrial district. "The warehouse is here. Fire station coverage comes from 2 locations, yours and Station 7. If your station receives a medical emergency call on the other side of town tomorrow night, around 11 p.m., response time to the warehouse increases by approximately 8 minutes. 8 minutes is enough time for what? For certain items to be removed from the building before they're destroyed. Jake stared at the map, understanding flooding through him. This isn't about accelerating demolition. You're using the fire to cover theft. Insurance fraud, Marco said casually. Much cleaner than other options. Vincent shot his nephew a warning look. The specifics don't concern you, Mr. Martinez. Your role is simply ensure your station is unavailable when the call comes in. And how am I supposed to do that? Emergency calls are routed through dispatch. Dispatch receives dozens of calls every shift. It would be unfortunate if one of those calls was misfiled. Delayed by a few minutes due to system glitches. Jake felt the walls closing in. You want me to tamper with emergency dispatch? We want you to experience a minor technical difficulty at an opportune moment. The conversation was interrupted by the waiter arriving with wine. Vincent waited until they were alone again before continuing. Mr. Martinez, let me be clear about something. This request isn't optional. You took our money. You became part of our family. Families help each other. And if I refuse? Marco leaned forward, his smile sharpening. Then we'll be very disappointed. And when Uncle Vincent is disappointed, people tend to reassess their priorities. The threat was delivered with the same casual tone Marco had used to discuss insurance fraud. Jake thought about Sophia, safe at school, trusting that her father would pick her up at 3 p.m. like always, trusting that the monsters would stay in storybooks where they belonged. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow at 6 p.m., Vincent said. After that, the situation becomes more complicated. Jake stood to leave, but Vincent's voice stopped him. Oh, and Mr. Martinez? Emma sends her regards. Jake turned back slowly. What? She's adjusting well to her new life. Beautiful house, excellent schools, all the opportunities a young girl could want. Vincent's smile was sharp as broken glass. It would be a shame if circumstances changed, and she had to relocate again. The message was clear. Emma's safety depended on Jake's cooperation. Not just Sophia's life, but Emma's future hung in the balance. Jake left the restaurant feeling like he was drowning in broad daylight. That evening, Jake sat at his kitchen table pretending to help Sophia with her homework while his mind churned through possibilities. He could call the police, report Vincent's plan, confess his own involvement, hope that cooperation might earn him some measure of protection. But Vincent had been clear about the consequences of betrayal, and Jake had no illusions about the law's ability to protect Sophia from men like Marco, who discussed violence like other people discussed the weather. He could refuse the request and accept the consequences. But what happened to Emma then? What happened to Sophia? He could go through with it. Delay the emergency response by 8 minutes. Let Vincent steal whatever was in that warehouse. Become a full participant in whatever criminal enterprise had already bought his soul. Dad, you're not helping. Jake looked down at Sophia's math worksheet. She was working on word problems involving addition and subtraction. Simple questions with clear answers. Sorry, mija. What's the problem? If Maria has 12 cookies and gives away 4, how many does she have left? 8. Sophia wrote down the answer, then looked up at him with serious eyes. Dad, are you sad about something? The question hit him like a physical blow. Why would you think I'm sad? You've been quiet lately, and you look at me sometimes like you're scared I'm going to disappear. Jake felt his throat tighten. I'm not scared of that. Good, because I'm not going anywhere. We're a team, remember? Right, we're a team. Sophia smiled and returned to her homework. If Jake has one daughter and loves her very much, how much love does he have? That's not a math problem, Sophia. Yes, it is. The answer is infinity, because daddy love never runs out. Jake reached across the table and touched his daughter's hand. 7 years old, and she already understood things that adults spent lifetimes trying to figure out. Love never ran out. But sometimes it led you into darkness you never imagined possible. At 9 p.m., after Sophia was asleep, Jake stood in his garage staring at a lockbox hidden behind paint cans. Inside was his service weapon from his brief stint in the Army National Guard. He'd kept it after his discharge, told himself it was for home protection. Now he wondered if there was another option. Vincent expected cooperation or compliance, but what if Jake offered neither? What if he offered war? Jake opened the lockbox and held the pistol in his hands. It was heavier than he remembered, cold and final. He could drive to Vincent's restaurant, end the threat at its source, protect Sophia and Emma and everyone else Vincent might hurt in the future. But Vincent wasn't operating alone. Marco would take over. Or someone else would. And Sophia would grow up with a father in prison for murder, assuming Vincent's people didn't retaliate first. Jake put the gun back in the lockbox. Some problems couldn't be solved with violence. Some monsters were too big to fight head-on. But maybe they could be outsmarted. The next morning, Jake made 2 phone calls. The first was to an old friend from his Army days, Danny Rodriguez, now a detective with the Chicago PD. They'd served together in Afghanistan, shared foxholes and nightmares, and the kind of bond that transcended civilian life. "Danny, it's Jake Martinez. I need to ask you something, and I need you to keep it between us for now." "Sure, brother. What's going on?" Hypothetically, if someone was being coerced into helping with a crime, and they provided information to law enforcement that led to arrests, what kind of protection could they expect? A long pause. "Jake, what the hell have you gotten yourself into? Just answer the question." "Depends on the crime, depends on the cooperation, depends on a lot of factors. But generally speaking, someone who helps bring down a major criminal operation could expect witness protection, relocation, new identities if necessary." "And their family?" "Family too. Jake, seriously, what's going on?" "I can't tell you yet, but Danny, if I call you tomorrow night and tell you there's about to be a fire in the industrial district, can you make sure someone's watching?" "Jesus, Jake. Can you do it?" Yeah, I can do it. But brother, you need to tell me what this is about." "Tomorrow night. After it's over, I promise." Jake's second call was to the fire department's IT specialista, young woman named Lisa, who handled the computer systems and dispatch protocols. "Lisa, it's Jake Martinez. I've got a question about the dispatch system." "Shoot. Is there a way to create a backup log of all emergency calls? Something that would record everything, even if the primary system had technical difficulties?" "Sure. The system automatically backs up to a secure server every 30 seconds. Even if the primary dispatch went down, we'd have a complete record of all incoming calls and response times. And this backup would be accessible to investigators?" "Absolutely. It's designed to be tamper-proof for exactly that reason." "Why?" "Just curious about the redundancy protocols." "Thanks, Lisa." Jake hung up and checked the time. 2 p.m. 9 hours until Vincent expected him to choose between cooperation and consequences. Instead, Jake was going to choose option 3. He was going to give Vincent exactly what he wanted and use it to destroy him. At 6 p.m., Jake called Vincent's number. "I'll do it," he said without preamble. "I knew you'd see reason. The medical emergency call will come in at 11:15. System glitch for 8 minutes. Understood. Mr. Martinez? This is the beginning of a much more profitable relationship for both of us." Jake hung up without responding. At 7 p.m., he called Danny Rodriguez. "It's happening tonight. Warehouse fire in the industrial district, probably around 11:30 p.m. They're planning to delay emergency response to cover theft and insurance fraud." "They?" "Jake, who the hell are you mixed up with?" "Vincent Torino." Danny whistled low. "Shit, brother. We've been trying to get something solid on his organization for years." "You'll have it tonight. But Danny, I need protection for my daughter, and there's another child, Emma Torino. She's Vincent's daughter, currently in foster care, supposed to be transferred to California soon." "Consider it handled. What's your plan?" "I'm going to help them commit the crime, and make sure you have everything you need to prove it." At 10 p.m., Jake kissed Sophia goodnight and tucked her into bed with extra care. "Love you, mija." Love you too, Dad. Will you check for monsters? Jake checked her closet and under her bed, the same ritual they'd performed since she was old enough to be afraid of the dark. All clear, he reported. Good. The monsters stay away when you're here. Jake smiled and turned off her light. They better. At 11 p.m., Jake was at the fire station, sitting at the dispatch console. His hands were steady, his mind clear. Everything depended on the next hour. At 11:14, the medical emergency call came in. Elderly man, chest pains, possible heart attack. The address was clear across town, exactly as Vincent had predicted. Jake logged the call and sent the ambulance. At 11:15, he initiated a system diagnostic that would delay dispatch routing for exactly 8 minutes. To anyone watching, it would look like a routine technical glitch. But the backup system was recording everything. At 11:23, the fire call came in. Warehouse blaze, industrial district, possible structure collapse. Jake logged the call immediately and dispatched all available units, but according to the primary system, the call hadn't come in until 11:31. 8 minutes of delay. Exactly as Vincent had requested. 8 minutes that were about to send Vincent Torino to prison for the rest of his life. Jake arrived at the warehouse with engine 19 and found chaos. The building was fully engulfed, flames shooting through the roof. But something was wrong. Very wrong. There's people inside! A bystander grabbed Jake's arm as he jumped from the truck. Security guards, they were making rounds when it started. Jake's blood turned to ice. The building was supposed to be empty. Captain Reynolds was shouting orders, organizing the attack on the blaze. Jake grabbed his gear and headed for the building entrance, but Reynolds caught his arm. Structure's not stable. We're setting up the ladder. There's people inside. We'll get them, but not by getting yourself killed. Jake looked at the burning building, seeing Emma's apartment all over again. Seeing the choice between following protocol and doing what was right, he broke away from Reynolds and ran toward the building. The interior was an inferno, but Jake could hear voices over the roar of flames. 2 men, trapped in an office area near the back. Jake followed the sound, crawling under the smoke, breathing apparatus hissing. He found them 2 security guards, one unconscious, one barely coherent from smoke inhalation. They were older men, probably working nights to supplement their retirement income. Men who were supposed to die so Vincent Torino could collect insurance money. Jake got the conscious guard over his shoulder and dragged the unconscious one toward the exit. The building groaned around them, support beams shifting as the fire consumed everything combustible. They made it out just as the roof collapsed. Both guards survived. Smoke inhalation, minor burns, but alive. Jake sat in the ambulance afterward, watching the warehouse burn to the ground. In a few hours, investigators would find evidence of arson. They'd discover that emergency response had been mysteriously delayed. They'd trace the delay back to Jake's system diagnostic, and Jake would tell them everything. Vincent had made one critical miscalculation. He'd assumed that Jake's moral flexibility extended to letting innocent people die. But some lines couldn't be crossed. Some choices revealed who you really were when everything else was stripped away. Jake pulled out his phone and called Danny Rodriguez. "It's over," he said. "Come get me." As he waited for the police to arrive, Jake thought about Emma's drawing. Stars shining above the flames. Hope burning bright in the darkness. Maybe some flames were meant to burn away the things that shouldn't exist in the first place. Maybe some stars were worth the price you paid to keep them shining. The safe house was a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a suburb 40 miles from Chicago. Beige walls, generic furniture, the kind of place designed to be forgettable. Jake sat at the kitchen table, watching Sophia color in a new book while federal agents moved quietly through their temporary life. 3 months had passed since the warehouse fire. 3 months since Jake's testimony had brought down Vincent Torino's organization. 3 months since their old life had been erased and rebuilt from scratch. Sophia adapted with the resilience that children possessed when they trusted the adults around them. She'd accepted the explanation that they were living somewhere new for a while because of Daddy's work. She'd started at a new school under a new name, made new friends, learned to answer when teachers called her Sarah instead of Sophia. Jake envied her ability to bend without breaking. Agent Sarah Cheno, relation to the social worker, though Jake sometimes wondered if the universe had a sense of irony sat across from him reviewing case files. The trials were approaching, and Jake would be the prosecution's star witness. Vincent's legal team is pushing for a plea deal, she said without looking up. 20 years instead of life. What does that mean for us? Depends. A plea deal means no trial, which means you wouldn't have to testify. But it also means Vincent serves less time. She finally looked at him. It's your call, Jake. You're the one whose testimony holds this all together. Jake watched Sophia carefully coloring inside the lines of a butterfly wing, pink and purple and gold, like something that might live in a fairy tale. What about Emma? Still in protective custody. The California placement fell through when Vincent's arrest made the news. No one wants to take responsibility for the daughter of a convicted crime boss. Even if she's innocent? Especially because she's innocent, people assume there's a target on her back. Jake felt the familiar twist of guilt in his stomach. His decision to cooperate with the investigation had saved those security guards, but it had also destroyed Emma's carefully planned future. Can I see her? Agent Chen closed the file. Jake, you know that's not possible. You're in witness protection. She's in protective custody. The whole point is to keep dangerous people from finding any of you. She's 8 years old. She doesn't understand why everyone she trusted has disappeared. And that's tragic. But your priority has to be keeping your daughter safe. Jake looked at Sophia again. She'd moved on to coloring a castle, complete with towers and flags and what looked like a dragon in the distance. What kind of dragon is that, Mija? Sophia looked up from her work. It's not a dragon. It's a prince who got turned into a dragon by an evil witch. But he's still good inside. How can you tell? Because he's protecting the castle instead of attacking it. Sometimes the scary-looking ones are really the good guys. Jake felt something shift in his chest. That's very wise. Sophia smiled and returned to her coloring. The princess is going to help him turn back into a prince. But first, she has to be brave enough to get close to him. Agent Chen was watching Jake with the expression of someone who'd worked too many cases involving children caught in adult messes. The plea hearing is next. Weak, she said quietly. If you want to reject the deal and go to trial, I'll support your decision. But think carefully about what you're willing to sacrifice for justice. That night, after Sophia was asleep, Jake sat on the apartment's small balcony and called Danny Rodriguez on the secure phone the FBI had provided. How you holding up, brother? Some days are better than others. How's the case looking? Solid. Your testimony, plus the evidence we collected from the warehouse, plus financial records we found after the arrests. Vincent's going away for a long time either way. And Marco? Flipped on his uncle to save his own skin. He's looking at 10 years instead of life. Honor among thieves, right? Jake watched an airplane's lights blink across the dark sky. Somewhere up there, people were traveling to new lives, new beginnings, new chances to get things right. Danny, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Shoot. If I testify at trial instead of accepting the plea deal, what are the chances Vincent's people try to retaliate? A long pause. Honestly? Low. Most of his organization got rolled up in the arrests. The ones still out there are more worried about staying out of prison than seeking revenge. But not zero. Never zero, Jake. You know that. Jake did know that. He'd learned it the moment Vincent Torino stepped onto his porch with an envelope full of money and threats disguised as gratitude. But there's something else. Danny continued. Word is that Vincent's been asking about his daughter. Wants to know where she is, who's taking care of her. He's in prison. Prison walls are porous when you have money and connections. Jake, if Vincent thinks you're the reason Emma's stuck in the system instead of safe in California, he'll blame me for her suffering. It's possible. Jake closed his eyes. Even locked away, Vincent was still pulling strings, still finding ways to make Jake pay for choosing justice over self-preservation. Thanks for the heads up. Jake? Whatever you decide about the trial, we'll keep you and Sophia safe, I promise. After hanging up, Jake sat in the darkness for a long time, thinking about dragons and princesses and the price of being brave enough to get close to dangerous things. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Agent Chen knocked on Jake's door at 9 a.m., her expression unreadable. Behind her stood a woman Jake recognized from News Photo's Assistant District Attorney Margaret Walsh, the prosecutor leading the case against Vincent Torino. "We need to talk," Walsh said without preamble. They sat in the apartment's living room while Sophia watched cartoons in her bedroom. Walsh was a small woman with steel-gray hair and the kind of focused intensity that came from years of putting dangerous people behind bars. "Mr. Martinez, I'll be direct. We have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Vincent Torino's daughter is missing." Jake felt the world tilt sideways. "What do you mean missing?" "She was being held at a secure facility in Ohio. Yesterday morning she wasn't in her room. No signs of struggle, no evidence of forced entry. She just vanished." Agent Chen leaned forward. "The facility thinks she may have run away, but Vincent's people might have taken her," Jake finished. Walsh nodded grimly. "If Vincent has his daughter back, he has leverage. He can threaten to harm her unless you refuse to testify. He wouldn't hurt his own child, wouldn't he?" Walsh's expression was skeptical. "Vincent Torino has killed people for lesser betrayals than yours, and if he believes you're responsible for Emma's suffering..." Jake stood and walked to the window. The suburban street looked peaceful, normal. Children riding bikes, neighbors watering lawns, the ordinary rhythms of safe lives. "What does this mean for the trial?" "It means we're recommending you accept the plea deal," Agent Chen said. "We can't guarantee your safety or Sophia's if Vincent is desperate enough to use his own daughter as a weapon." Jake thought about Emma's drawing, still folded in his wallet. Stars burning bright above the flames, a little girl's vision of hope in the darkness. What if she really did run away? "It's possible," Walsh admitted. "The facility said she'd been increasingly withdrawn lately, stopped eating regularly, stopped talking to counselors. Classic signs of depression in children who've experienced trauma. Where would an 8-year-old girl go? Family usually. But Emma's grandfather is still in the hospital and her father is in prison. She doesn't have anyone else." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. Emma didn't have anyone else. No safe harbor, no trusted adult, no one who'd ever promised to keep the monsters at bay. Except him. "I want to help find her." "Absolutely not," Agent Chen said immediately. "You're in witness protection for a reason. She trusted me once. If she's scared and alone, maybe Vincent is counting on exactly that kind of thinking." Walsh's voice was sharp. "This could be a trap, Mr. Martinez. Vincent might be using his daughter to draw you out." Jake looked toward Sophia's room, where his own daughter was safe and protected and unaware that her father was considering walking back into the fire. What if it's not a trap? What if she's really just a scared little girl who needs help? "Then we'll find her," Agent Chen said. "But you'll do it from here, where you're safe." But Jake was already thinking about Emma's eyes in that burning building. About the way she'd trusted him completely in the space between one heartbeat and the next. About the promise he'd made to always be one of the good guys. That afternoon, while Sophia napped, Jake made a decision that would have horrified Agent Chen. He called information and got the number for Mercy General Hospital. "I'm looking for information about a patient," he told the nurse. "Elderly man admitted 3 months ago after a heart attack. Last name Torino. Are you family?" "I'm a friend. I was wondering about visiting hours." A pause. "Sir, Mr. Torino passed away 2 weeks ago. I'm sorry for your loss." The phone went dead in Jake's hand. Emma's grandfather was dead. The last connection to her old life, the last safe harbor she'd known, was gone. And no one had told her. Jake sat at the kitchen table, staring at his phone, understanding flooding through him. Emma hadn't been kidnapped by Vincent's people. She'd run away because she'd somehow learned about her grandfather's death. An 8-year-old girl, alone in the world, trying to find her way back to the only place that had ever felt like home. Jake thought about the apartment building where he'd first found Emma. It had been destroyed in the fire, but the neighborhood was still there. The familiar streets, the playground where she might have played, the corner store where her grandfather might have bought her ice cream. If Emma was trying to go home, that's where she'd go. Jake looked toward Sophia's bedroom, then at his phone, then at the keys to the car Agent Chen had provided for emergencies. Sometimes being brave enough to get close to dangerous things meant risking everything you'd worked to protect. Sometimes it meant choosing between safety and doing what was right. Jake picked up the keys. The drive to Chicago took 90 minutes. Jake had left a note for Agent Chen explaining where he'd gone and why, knowing it would probably end his witness protection and possibly his life. But some promises couldn't be broken, even when keeping them meant destroying yourself. The old neighborhood looked different in daylight, smaller, shabbier, more desperate than it had seemed during emergency calls. Jake parked 3 blocks from where the apartment building had stood and walked the rest of the way. The lot was empty now, cleared of debris, marked with a chain-link fence and signs warning away trespassers. But someone had cut a hole in the fence, and Jake could see small footprints in the dirt beyond. He squeezed through the gap and found himself standing where Emma's home had been, where her grandfather had made her pancakes and kept her safe from a world that wanted to use her as leverage in adult games. "Emma?" His voice echoed off the surrounding buildings. No answer. Jake walked the perimeter of the lot, looking for signs of recent habitation. In the far corner, behind a pile of salvaged bricks, he found what he was looking for: a small shelter made from cardboard and scavenged materials. Inside, a sleeping bag that looked like it had come from a donation center, a backpack Jake recognized from the night of the fire, and Emma's drawing of stars above flames, now taped to the cardboard wall like a window looking out onto hope. But no Emma. Jake sat down in the makeshift shelter and tried to think like a scared 8-year-old. Where would she go during the day? Where would she feel safe? The answer came to him like a gift. The hospital. Mercy General, where her grandfather had been. She might not know he was dead. She might be trying to visit him, to reconnect with the last person who'd ever made her feel loved. Jake ran back to his car and drove across town with a prayer burning in his chest. He found her in the hospital cafeteria. Emma sat alone at a corner table, picking at a sandwich that someone had probably bought her out of kindness. She was thinner than Jake remembered, wearing clothes that were too big and shoes that had seen too many miles. But she was alive. She was safe. She was there. Jake approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. When she looked up and saw him, her face went through a series of emotions: surprise, fear, recognition, and finally something that might have been relief. "Hi, Emma. You came," she said quietly. "Of course I came. I've been worried about you." Emma looked down at her sandwich. "They told me Grandpa died." "I know. I'm so sorry. They said I couldn't see him because I wasn't family. But I am family. I'm his granddaughter." Jake sat down across from her, noting the exhaustion in her small frame, the hollow look in her eyes. "You've been living in that lot, haven't you? Where your old apartment was?" Emma nodded. I thought if I waited there, Grandpa might come home. Or Daddy might come get me." "Emma, your daddy can't come get you right now. He's in a place where he can't leave." "I know. Prison." She said it matter-of-factly, like she was discussing the weather. "Someone at the foster place told me. They said he's a bad man who does bad things." Jake felt his heart break a little. "People are complicated, sweetheart. Sometimes good people make bad choices. Are you going to take me back to the foster place?" The question hung between them. Jake looked at this little girl who'd trusted him once in a burning building, who'd drawn him pictures of stars shining above flames, who'd been abandoned by every system that was supposed to protect her. He thought about Sophia, safe in their temporary apartment with federal agents standing guard. He thought about Vincent Torino, locked away but still dangerous, still pulling strings from behind prison walls. He thought about the choice between doing what was safe and doing what was right. "No," Jake said. "I'm not taking you back to the foster place." Emma's eyes widened. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe. Somewhere you can be a little girl instead of a bargaining chip." "What's a bargaining chip?" Jake reached across the table and took her small hand in his. "Something adults use when they forget that children aren't things to be traded. But you're not a thing, Emma. You're a person, and you deserve better than what you've been given." Emma squeezed his hand. "Will you stay with me this time?" The promise was dangerous. It violated every protocol the FBI had established. It would put Jake and Sophia at risk. It would probably end their witness protection and force them into a life of constant vigilance. But looking at Emma's face, Jake realized that some promises were worth any price. "Yes," he said. "I'll stay with you this time." Emma smiled for the first time since he'd found her. It was like watching stars emerge from behind clouds. "Can we go now?" she asked. "I want to meet your daughter, the one in the pictures you showed me." Jake blinked in surprise. "What pictures?" Emma pulled out a folded newspaper clipping from her backpack. It was a story about the warehouse fire, complete with a photo of Jake and Sophia at a fire department family picnic from the previous year. "I kept it," Emma said, "to remember that there are still good people in the world." Jake stared at the photo, him and Sophia laughing at something off camera, her small hand in his, both of them unaware that their peaceful life was about to be shattered and rebuilt. But maybe rebuilt was the wrong word. Maybe what they were about to become was simply more complete. "Yeah," Jake said, standing and extending his hand to Emma. "Let's go home." As they walked out of the hospital together, Jake knew he was crossing a line he could never uncross. He was choosing love over law, family over safety, hope over fear. He was choosing to be brave enough to get close to dangerous things, and for the first time in months, that felt like the right choice. The apartment felt different when Jake opened the door with Emma beside him. Sophia looked up from her coloring book, took in the small girl standing next to her father, and smiled with the immediate acceptance that children possessed when their world suddenly included someone new. "You're Emma," Sophia said matter-of-factly. "Dad told me about you." Emma nodded shyly. "You're Sophia. You like dinosaurs." "I love dinosaurs. Do you want to see my collection?" And just like that, the two girls disappeared into Sophia's room, leaving Jake alone with the enormity of what he'd just done. His phone rang almost immediately. Agent Chen's number. "Jake, where the hell are you? Your note said Chicago, but you can't just—" "I found Emma." A pause. "Where?" "She's with me. She's safe." "Jake, listen to me very carefully. You need to bring her in immediately. Every minute she's with you increases the danger to all of you." Jake looked toward Sophia's room, where he could hear the girls talking about something that involved a lot of giggling. "I'm not bringing her in." "What do you mean you're not bringing her in?" "I mean she's been bounced around enough. She needs stability, not another foster placement or protective custody facility." "Jake, this is insane. You're in witness protection. You can't just adopt a crime boss's daughter. Watch me." Jake hung up and turned off the phone. From Sophia's room came the sound of children being children safe, happy, unaware that their father had just declared war on federal bureaucracy and possibly organized crime. But they were together. All three of them were together, and for the first time since this whole nightmare began, that felt like enough. Jake walked to Sophia's room and found both girls sitting on the floor, surrounded by dinosaur toys and coloring books. Emma was holding Sophia's stuffed elephant, and Sophia was showing her how to make a brachiosaurus out of building blocks. "Dad," Sophia announced. "Emma's going to live with us now." Emma looked up at Jake with hope and fear warring in her eyes. "Is that okay?" Jake knelt down between the two girls and thought about all the ways this could go wrong, about Vincent Torino's reach from prison, about federal agents who would try to separate them, about the uncertain future they were choosing over the safe present they were abandoning. Then he looked at Emma's drawing, now taped to Sophia's wall next to pictures of dinosaurs and princesses, stars burning bright above the flames. Yeah, Jake said, wrapping both girls in a hug. That's okay. Outside, somewhere in the world, dangerous people were making dangerous plans. But inside this room, two little girls were building dinosaur families and coloring pictures of castles where dragons protected princesses and everyone got to live happily ever after. And maybe, Jake thought, that was the most dangerous thing of all, the radical act of choosing love when the world demanded fear. Maybe that was how you kept the stars shining, even when everything around them was burning.